Hello, I'm Michael. Do you have a favourite animal? You do? Well, I can't decide whether I like dogs or cats best. What do you think? And I can't decide whether to tell you my favourite dog story or my favourite cat story. So why don't I tell you them both? The first is about a cat called Slinky Malinky Catflaps. The house was asleep. It was silent and still, with flickering shadows on ceiling and sill. Slinky Malinky was cosy and snug, curled in a ball on the raggedy rug. He opened an eye, inspected his toes, and washed from his tail to the tip of his nose. He wiped round an ear with a delicate paw and stretched as he silently slipped through the door. Whiskers all twitching and eyes shining bright, he squeezed through his cat flap and into the night. He prowled round the garden and smelt every smell, from the rambling rose to the snail in its shell. Then, with a curious questioning call, he sprang to the top of the tumble-down wall. "Prow!" he called. Out of a bush at the end of the wall came two creeping shadows, one big and one small. Slipping and slithering, scrambling down, were Grey-Whack Jones and Butterball Brown. Next to the hole by the tunnel house door, furtively lurking, were two shadows more. Up through the leaves of the five-finger tree climbed Pimpernel Pew and Mushroom McGee. Down on the grass by the cucumber frame, mysterious figures were playing a game. They tumbled and chased with a scuffle and cuff, the Poppadom kittens and Grizzly Macduff. From nooks and from crannies, from mischief and game, from every corner and crevice they came. They sat in the moonlight's silvery glow, hobnobbing happily, 10 in a row. But out of the hedge by the rickety seat, disturbing the birds in their feathery sleep, something was sneaking on Pussyfoot Paw, the cranky and crotchety Scarface Claw. Then, all at once, came the ear-splitting sound of a caterwaul symphony echoing round. Prow! Ye-ow! Brow-wee! Ye-ow! Spit-a-pit! Spit-a-pit! Wow-yow! It woke all the neighbours. From window and door came bellowing shouts and a furious roar. Shh! They all said, "What a rackety bunch! Stop that commotion and go home at once!" With a grumbling growl and a scuttle of paw, off and away galloped Scarface Claw. And down from the wall, with a hiss and a spit, went Slinky Malinky Lickety-Split. The others all followed until they were 9, trotting behind in a tail-waving line. Whiskers all twitching and eyes shining bright, they squeezed through the cat flap and out of the night. The house was asleep. It was silent and still, with flickering shadows on ceiling and sill. Slinky Malinky was cosy and snug, with all his friends on the raggedy rug. They sat in the firelight's welcoming glow, hobnobbing happily, 10 in a row. And that story was called Slinky Malinky Catflaps. And now that Slinky Malinky and his friends are sat in front of the fire, why don't I tell you about my favourite dog? He's called Hairy Maclary, and he's from Donaldson's Dairy. Out of the gate and off for a walk went Hairy Maclary from Donaldson's Dairy, and Hercules Morse as big as a horse with Hairy Maclary from Donaldson's Dairy. Bottomly pots covered in spots, Hercules Morse as big as a horse, and Hairy Maclary from Donaldson's Dairy. Muffin Maclay like a bundle of hay, bottomly pots covered in spots, Hercules Morse as big as a horse, and Hairy Maclary from Donaldson's Dairy. Bitzer Maloney, all skinny and bony, Muffin Maclay like a bundle of hay, Bottomley Potts covered in spots, Hercules Morse as big as a horse, and Hairy Maclary from Donaldson's Dairy. Schnitzel von Krumm with a very low tum, Bitzer Maloney, all skinny and bony, Muffin Maclay like a bundle of hay, Bottomley Potts covered in spots, Hercules Morse as big as a horse, and Hairy Maclary from Donaldson's Dairy. With tails in the air, they trotted on down, past the shops and the park, to the far end of town. They sniffed at the smells and they snooped at each door, when suddenly, out of the shadows they saw Scarface Claw, the toughest Tom in town. "Yow!" said Scarface Claw. Off with a yowl and a wail and a howl and a scatter of paws and a clatter of claws went Schnitzel von Krumm with the very low tum, Bitzer Maloney, all skinny and bony, Muffin Maclay like a bundle of hay, Bottomley Potts covered in spots, Hercules Morse as big as a horse, and Hairy Maclary from Donaldson's Dairy, straight back home to bed. And that story was called Hairy Maclary of Donaldson's Dairy. Wow, that Scarface Claw gets everywhere, doesn't he? At least Hairy Maclary is back home, tucked up in bed. And that's where you need to be now, too. I'll see you soon for another story. Good night. Now, I still can't decide whether maybe I like the dogs or the cats. Maybe it's the cat. Come here, you. Come here. Come here. I'll give you a little tickle under there. You say, ticky, 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 ticky. Meow.
The time has come to say good night, to say sleep tight till the morning light. The time has come to say good night, it's the end of a lovely day. We had so much fun today, tomorrow's just a dream away. And now it's time to say good night at the end of a lovely day.